Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our Archiware webinar Wednesday. On this Wednesday, I've got Josef Doods. This is David Fox speaking, I should say that first, from the UK. And Josef, CEO of Archiware, is with me. Hi, Josef.
Yep. Hi, David.
Good afternoon.
Hi, everybody.
Good morning to everybody in the morning side of the world. So this webinar, we're going to cover 10 great new features in P5 version 6, exactly as it says on the tin. So, and got Josef with me to elaborate on various points. What we'll do is we'll take questions via the questions panel in the GoToWebinar UI. At the end of the presentation, I think we'll be about 30 minutes, 35 minutes of showing you some slides, some talking, some demos. So specifically what we are going to be covering in this webinar is on this slide. So I'm just going to whip through this quickly and then we'll get into the content. So we're going to have a little look at the platforms that we're currently supporting as of version 6. We're going to look at the new UI design and talk a little bit about HTTPS security, which has been added in this version, plus the new user and group setup a little bit. We're going to look at the new cloud storage vendor support and do a little demo looking at adding some Google Cloud Storage. We'll also look at the new simplified configuration of cloud and disk storage via a new wizard within the product's UI. This is slightly in the wrong order. We're going to look at the P5 Companion app, which is the new app that allows you to archive using P5 from your desktop, and that supports Mac, Windows, and Linux desktops. We'll talk a bit about the new REST-based API. Then the P5 LTO Edition, which is the new low-cost bundle. It's been around for a little while, but it's got a new name, so we'll talk about that. Then we'll look at the ways to deploy Amazon in the cloud, specifically the Amazon Web Services Marketplace. P5 is now in there, so we'll fire up a P5 instance in Amazon and connect to it, just to show you how simple that is. Then we'll look at the roadmap for future versions, 6.1 and beyond, and then we'll take your questions. So let's kick off. How does that sound, Josef?
Awesome, great.
Looking forward to the webinar. Good. Okay, so now, Josef, I'm going to let you talk a little bit about this because this is kind of your area. You're aware of the direction for the product and so on. So do you just want to run through some of these points for everybody?
Yeah, okay. Thank you, David. And also again from me, I would like to welcome you all here today, and especially in these times when each of us has other worries as well. So thank you again for your time today. My part is to explain a technology update. So what does it mean, a technology update? I like to do it with a little comparison. So it's a technology update. It's more like a tough workout. So actually you don't like it, but you feel better afterwards. So, or you should feel better afterwards. So as with other software, P5 consists of a number of components, and these components are part of changes. So we have an example operating system, libraries, open source, products, and so on. And these technologies are constantly evolving and therefore subject of changes. But we can't continuously integrate these changes into P5. This would destabilize P5 and very often make it incompatible with older operating systems. So the challenge is to find a compromise between innovation on one hand and stability and compatibility on the other. So when is the right time to say goodbye to support for an older Mac OS X or Windows or Linux? After 5 or 10 or 15 years, everyone would have a different answer to that. With P5 version 5.6, this balancing act was extreme. So on one side, we support a 15 years old Linux, and on another side, there was Mac OS 10.14 Mojave, which also was supported. So we decided it is now time for more innovation again. If we take a closer look at 6.0, then there are major internal changes, but relative little new functionality. The most important things we have changed under the hood. So a new version of the P5 engine, the central application server, Navi server we name it. Navi server is an open source project that Archiware shares responsibility for. This made HTTPS and therefore REST and therefore the P5 companion possible. So more to this later. Then we integrate a new version of control system based. So the version control is one of the major points in software developing. So this controls the entire system. This is based on Mercury. And this allows us to port a much wider range on platforms. In example, again, FreeBSD and different NAS boxes as well. So, and finally, a lot of future is also insight for further developments. All this taken us 2 years for developing, 1 year for only develop and another year for entire testing and quality assurance. So nobody should notice that he is running an update. And if there are problems, the config and the index are compatible with version 5. So a downgrade is possible. So this is a little bit more background information and technology updates. And I'd like to give now back to David.
Thanks, Joseph. So something just occurred to me actually. Navi server, which is what the application server is based on. That's why the process is called NSD, isn't it? Navi server daemon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
I just learned something. That's good. I like to learn something too. So next, we're going to look at the current state of support across various different platforms. So on the left-hand side, we have got. Sorry, I keep getting the wrong slide. On the left-hand side, we have our OS installers. So we still support, of course, Windows, Mac, Linux, and in the red box we have FreeBSD. FreeBSD has come back in version 6 as a fully supported platform. It was previously like Solaris, where in the box below we have client only. So we can still run version 6 on Solaris, but only as a client or as an agent. So we're running there to collect data, to send that data back to a fully fledged P5 server for backup or archive or whatever. And I think some of the reasons behind bringing FreeBSD back as a fully fledged platform is that it's a very good platform on which to run ZFS file systems, and there are some interesting open source NAS stacks like FreeNAS, for example, which is FreeBSD based, and we have some interest around that for P5 and some customers using it. So now we're back available to run on FreeNAS. As far as
David,
yep.
We have a lot of reseller. They are producing a NAS system by themselves, and they're using FreeBSD as operating system for building their NAS systems. And this is very powerful because you have ZFS as file system, and this is one of the stablest file systems in the entire data structure. So this is a very powerful system.
Yeah, yeah. So interesting that you have some resellers that are actually dedicated to providing free BSD with FreeNAS as a platform for their customers, where they can stand behind it, understand it, support it, and then they use P5 to manage the data in that environment.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's interesting. NAS devices down in the middle here. We've got QNAP, Synology, Netgear. They're in the box really because we're actually in the stores across those 3 NAS products. So you can go and search for Archiware and install it without having to go to Archiware's website and download an installer. So it's very easy. But we support a bunch of other NAS devices like the LumaForge Jellyfish and many others where you can install onto the Linux OS that's embedded in the product and have P5 running directly on your NAS. But the QNAP, Synology, and Netgear were in the stores. Interestingly, LTO support is available for QNAP, and more recently we've got it sort of certified on Netgear. So we have some people running LTO hardware connected to the Netgear Ready NAS directly via the SAS port. Same thing on QNAP. So for a small office, you can have a backup and an archive to LTO directly hanging off of the NAS device without having to have an additional server to support that. So that's the NAS devices. And then we have a third column now on the right-hand side where we have AWS Marketplace. So for those that don't know, AWS is Amazon Web Services. This is the big cloud platform where you can fire up Windows and Linux and any kind of compute resource that you want. And we are now in their marketplace, which means that you can deploy an Ubuntu Linux with P5 installed in a few seconds by just searching for Archiware and deploying. And this is a bring your own license model. So you're just paying Amazon for the cost of the compute and storage and network resources that you're using, and then you will use a purchased P5 license. It's the same license that you would run anywhere else. So we're treating AWS Marketplace as another platform that we run on, just like a QNAP or a Windows box. And finally, at the bottom of this slide, it says, as has always been the case, that there's one installer that installs the entire P5 suite, and the license that you install on there determines which modules you have access to, and how many tape drives and media management slots and so on is all decided by the license. So let's get into some of the new features. So modernized user interface design plus HTTPS. So modernized user interface design is a reskin. So you can see in the graphic there, we have some new palettes of colors. We have some new iconography. The whole thing looks a bit more modern than did version P5, which had been around for a little while. So we think we're a bit more kind of in vogue in terms of web interfaces. But importantly, you'll find everything in there where you're expecting it to be. So there's not some big reorganization of the structure of the configuration. Everything has the same name. Everything is where you would expect it to be. But in addition, we've introduced HTTPS for a secure connection to the web admin interface. So if you're administering your P5 server from a remote location, maybe over a public internet connection, then you can put a secure certificate on your P5 server, whether that's a self-signed cert you made yourself or something real that maybe you got a free one from Let's Encrypt, which is quite a useful way of getting a certificate. And this pops into a location in the P5 configuration so that you can have your own certificate running in there. So what I'm going to do is just show you this live. So I have a browser running here connecting to a VM running on Linux. And you can see this is the new login screen. Interestingly, you'll see that I get prompted here that the username and the password are admin on a new installation until such time that I change that. So I'm logging in as prompted, and the software reminds me that I should go change this password because until I do, it's not very secure. And then here is my overview window for the whole thing. So if I wanted to now, I could go change my password via the P5 menu and replace admin with something more secure. So if I just spin around the familiar areas to those of you that use the product, everything is pretty much as you would expect it to be in terms of the configuration. We still have the same tabbed interface for the properties for a particular element within the product. Just a reskin is what we have here. But you'll also notice there's a lock symbol up here indicating that this is secured with a certificate, which we can look at. And you'll see that this is the self-signed root certificate that the product installs with. So this isn't considered to be secure in that all of these installations will have the same certificate till you go create a new one, either a self-signed or a purchased SSL certificate. Okay, so I think that's all I was going to show you. But then the other thing that has changed in version 6, which is kind of the reason that you're logging in with that default admin credential, is that the user management is different in version 6 insofar as we no longer authenticate operating system or directory users when you're logging into the P5 admin interface. We've switched to not integrating with the OS authentication, but doing all the authentication against our own user database. So this means that the admin user will exist in a fresh installation, and this is the one where you're going to change the password. If you're upgrading from a previous P5 installation, then you will see all the user records will exist and will survive the upgrade, but you will need to set the passwords within P5 so that you can then log in with the passwords that users are expecting, because we're no longer authenticating against the OS. And I think I'd be right in saying, Joseph, that the task, as you were alluding to earlier, of maintaining code that works with so many different operating systems, so many different operating system versions, means that it's difficult to support those PAM authentication integrations everywhere. And so we've kind of simplified that now in version 6. And there is one place where you're going to set the passwords for P5 users, and that's directly within the interface here. Is there anything else you want to add around that, Joseph?
It's not just it was too complicated, so it was also not so flexible, because we could not separate user in different groups. So there was also a really reason for adding the management by ourselves, and not only because it was too complicated, because we just had the code already to authenticate against the operating system, but we had not the flexibility to manage our own groups, and that was the reason that we had changed from the authorization against the operating system to do it by ourselves.
Yeah, and we'll have a little look at the groups in a short while when we're looking at the P5 companion app. Yeah. So that's the Modernised UI. Back into the slides. So next we're going to look at the P5 companion app. So this is a new app that will run on Windows, Mac or Linux desktops. It's based on the Electron framework, and so therefore it's cross-platform. And the companion app allows archiving directly from workstation desktop. So that's the Mac Finder, the Windows Explorer, and so on. So it allows drag and drop of assets, files, and folders from local storage or network shares into this app, and then we will archive the files that you drag in, and then we can optionally replace those files. We can delete the originals and replace them with stub files, which act as pointers back to the original file. And these stub files can then in turn be dragged into the P5 companion app such that they can be viewed. So you can preview previews and metadata, and also restore back to the original location. The licensing for the P5 companion app is such that you don't need a license at each desktop that you run the app. You just need to have a license for the archive module. So that means that you could have one P5 archive server with the archive module connected to, let's say, a tape or cloud storage, and then you could have as many workstations as you want with the P5 companion app installed. No license required to run that, just a license required on the server. There's some new group config that actually enables this to work. So what we'll do is we'll have a look at that in a sec via the live demo. This is just a little overview from the documentation of what the app looks like. So we have 4 areas across the top, excuse me. There's a job monitor on the left-hand side. We have archive and restore tabs in the middle, and we have a configuration panel on the right-hand side, and then an area into which we're going to drag files to archive. So let's see how this works. I've got the P5 companion app running here, and I have a shared a data share mounted from my P5 archive server here. So this data in data share is actually local to the P5 server, so it can access all of these files quite easily. If I wanted to have my local machine available such that I could archive local assets, then the local machine would need to be added as a client onto the P5 server. But in most instances, you're going to be archiving from shared storage. So the location.
David.
Yeah, Joseph.
Can I ask a question? Do we have an overview about the hardware, what you're now showing, so that the people are getting an idea what you're showing currently? Because
yeah, I do. And I also have a slide also that that illustrates the configuration here. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to archive something, and then I'll talk through how that's actually working. So, but yeah, basically I have my Linux server represented by what you see highlighted. I'm actually running a VM. So here is my CentOS 7 desktop. So this is where everything is running from in terms of this P5 demo. And there's some storage attached. I have a data share, which is a shared folder via SMB on the Linux machine. That's mounted on the Mac desktop, and it's mounted via the path volumes data share, which is where the system actually sees that mounted. So what I'm going to do is just show you quickly the P5 companion. So on the right-hand side here, I have my configuration for the companion, where we're hooking it up to the IP of that Linux server at the top. The standard port 8000 is being used, and then authentication using the admin account, and then I have the ID of an archive plan, which has already been configured on the archive server, which is the one that the companion is going to use to do its archiving. And then if I want to do some archiving, so I have my data share. Within that, there's a folder called Media for Archive. If I want to archive this whole folder, I just drop it on to the P5 app, click on the Next button. I now have the option to manually enter metadata into any of the fields that have been configured in the archive index. I won't do that because this caption field is going to be ingested from the files themselves via a metadata script. And then I hit the archive button, it tells me that it's submitted a job, and the job monitor is then open. So that's this button on the left hand side is the job monitor. I can see my job running. It'll finish in a sec. It goes down to the list of completed jobs. So I got an overview of the jobs that are running on my P5 server. And you can see that the various JPEGs and the movie file have all been replaced by P5C files. So these are our stub files. These files are very small. So this one here is 76 bytes. So it just basically contains enough information to recover that asset. Now, these are now obviously taking up far less space than the original files were. Should I wish to restore one or more of these, I switch to the Restore tab in the Archive app and then highlight some of these files here, drag them into the drop area, and they show up. And then what's brilliant here is that you can click to reveal any thumbnails or metadata. So you can see on archiving this dandelion.jpg, we generated a preview. We also captured the IPTC caption that contains dandelion. You'll see some of these have got other captions like gumball machine. So the preview and the metadata were all captured at the point of archive. And then including a movie. So this one here, if I play that movie, you can see that playing back. So I can now get a really clear idea of the data that I'm about to restore. Once I'm happy, if I wanted to, I can remove or add more files into here. If I click on Restore, that triggers the job back on the server. This is all working with disks, so it's pretty quick. So you'll see immediately back in the Finder, those JPEGs, the gumball, the moon, the movie file, have all been recovered back from the archive. Of course, when you archive using the P5 companion app, the same data goes into the P5 archive index. So you could also recover this in the traditional way using the web GUI by browsing into the archive index or searching. But this tool gives many users the ability to do a lot of archive workflow from their desktops without having to interact directly with the P5 web admin interface. So that's really great. Really like that. So how is this? Yeah, you too, Joseph. Good for you. So how's this set up? If we just look back at this slide here, there's a couple of things that you need to be aware of to understand how this P5 server is able to do what it does. Basically, the data share area on the server that these JPEGs are contained within could be mounted on a Mac under a particular mount point, volumes data share in this case, which is the way that it gets onto my desktop. But maybe over here I have a Windows laptop, and maybe over there the data share is mounted on a drive called H. And so H is completely different to /data share. These are all different kind of paths. So somehow the server needs to be able to see the assets that it's being asked to archive and figure out where they are in terms of the local file systems on that server or on one of the clients, P5 clients connected to that server. So the way that happens is via the new group configuration, which is quite simple. So if we go into the archive module and then down to advanced options, we have group preferences, and I have an admin group which is assigned to my archive plan. And within the admin group, I've specified that data share is a path from which people might be archiving using the P5 companion app. And what happens is the server puts some invisible files or some hidden files inside of this data share path, so that when it sees assets being archived from within something underneath that path, it can find the hidden files that Archiware is storing there, and from that it can identify which share it is, and then it's able to find those files locally via the local file system for archive. So it's a new configuration step. If you're using the P5 companion, you need to make sure that the server knows which paths people might need to be archiving from. In addition to this, something else that's new in the actual archive plan that we were using.
David?
Yes.
Can I add a note?
Of course.
So important is to understand that you can add also in your network P5 clients. So if your P5 archive server is not your P5 data server or file server, then you only have to install on the server P5 as a client and add this here in the group, and then the archive will also work from different servers in your network. So it's not required that only the P5 server can hold the shares. It's only required that P5 is installed on the file server, and then you add the server here in the group setup, and then P5 companion will point to the right data.
There is a P5 companion guide on the Archiware website under manuals, which will run through in more detail the way that this is set up, including talking about what Joseph just mentioned, where you've got multiple different clients that are data sources, and how you set those up and add multiple paths into the configuration so you can archive from lots of different places. So go take a look at the that guide for more information. And the other thing I was just about to mention was within my P5 companion setup, you remember we were using archive plan number 10,001. If I go and find archive 10,001 and edit it, you'll see under options, for those familiar with the setup of archive plans, this option here, delete files, previously just had the option to not delete files or to delete files. Now it includes in version 6 the option to delete the files but create those stub files that you saw, so that we replace the original file with the stub file. And if we look at one of those stub files, we will find in a text editor that it actually just contains an ID, the indication of which archive index is storing that file, and the original file name. So it just contains enough information to allow the P5 server via the companion app to restore that file back and replace the stub file with the original. Okay, so back to
David.
Yes.
David.
Yep.
Can I add a note? So, in example, if you like to move these files later on, the location where you are storing this P5 archive app files, it doesn't matter. So you can move them to another server. You can store them on desktop. It doesn't matter where you are storing these files. These are enough information for the P5 companion to restore the entire file, which are then forced by the restore process. So the restore process is understanding where the files are located, and then he is restoring the file in the same place.
Yeah, of course, I just tried to restore it from the desktop, but the desktop of this Mac is not configured in the groups as a storage location for archive, so that's why that failed. But I could create a new folder on my shared storage.
If you move it on top of, yeah,
and then I could move this file into the Untitled folder, and then from there,
you have the same already inside. You have to reset.
Oh yes, I need to remove the one that's there, don't I? And then like so, and then we can restore, and then the restored file shows up in the different folder. So these files are portable. Okay, perfect. So let's continue with the next slide to see what we have in store. We have the new API, REST-based API. So everybody, well, many people will know that Archiware P5 and backwards has a command line interface API, for which we have many third-party MAM systems and other storage tools integrating with P5, particularly P5 Archive. So Joseph, would you like to just say a few things about why a REST API is the right way to be going for future integrations with P5?
Yeah, REST is much more different than the current CLI interface what we have. So we are both interfaces are entire compatible, but how you are programming with REST and how you are programming with the old CLI is very different. So with the old CLI, you need something like a server to communicate with the P5 server. So there is, if you're working in a network, then you need always a server-server communication. With REST, you do not need this any longer. You can direct from a browser, you can communicate direct from a browser with the P5 server. So this gives much more possibility to the developer to choose the right programming environment for their coding. So this is much more flexible than this old CLI was. So we, in the future, we think that the REST API gives the developer community around P5 much more option than it was in the past possible with the old CLI. So
Excellent.
this
Yeah.
is a really good investment for all our partners to have a look at this REST interface.
Yep. I'm just going to interject to thank those people that are asking some questions. So what I'm going to do is I see the questions that you've been typing in, and we'll answer all of those at the end of the kind of regular presentation. So also thanks for so many of you joining us. Really great numbers. Okay. So having had a little intro to the API, there is a full documentation for this API, which I'll show you in a sec. So if we just drop out of these slides again for a moment. The documentation I have open in a tab here. So we will follow up the everybody that attends with some links and a recording of this video, of this webinar. So don't worry about writing stuff down. This link will be in there. But the API is fully documented here. And you get examples of all the kind of calls that you can make against your P5 server and the structure of the responses. I've got a tool here running called Insomnia. Those of whom are developers will probably be familiar with that. So just to give you some examples, this is a URL which I'm firing off at my Linux P5 version 6 server on the standard unencrypted port in this case. And then this particular command here will give me the info about the server, which will include the version of the software that it's running, the host ID, whereabouts the software is installed. Just a couple more example calls. If I use volumes, then I will get a list of all of the volumes configured in my installation. And then I get a reference to this path here, which will tell me some more information about volume 10,001. So if I just edit the call and put 10,001 on the end of the URL, then I will get the stats about that particular volume. So you can use this API to both make GET requests to recover information from the configuration, like you see here, information about a volume. But you can also drive the jobs and configure jobs and create new tasks and so on. So the entire product is opened up via this API. And one nice idea I like is that people will be able to, with a bit of knowledge about creating small web applications, will be able to make like a control panel, something that will display currently active jobs, that kind of thing. You'll be able to write these things yourselves. And I'm quite looking forward to the community around Archiware P5, sort of sharing some simple web applications and things that solve particular problems for them. So not a lot to say about the API. Just wanted to show you a few different calls and talk about why it's there. So we're looking forward to new integrations coming out for P5 that are using this. Okay, so back to the slides. And we had the demo. Next up, some improved support for cloud storage. So as many of you will know, we have very comprehensive support for cloud storage, and each time a new version comes out, we're adding some more deeper support for already supported vendors like Amazon Web Services, for example, where we've included the Glacier Deep Archive. So Glacier is Amazon's perhaps tape-based version of S3, where it's much slower to recover assets from this archive, but it's also much cheaper. So Glacier Deep Archive is actually down to $1 per terabyte per month, which is incredibly small amount. So a petabyte for $1,000 a month, which is probably the cheapest cloud storage you can get, with some provisos that it's going to be, relatively slow to recover from. So that is now included and supported in P5. The new vendor that we've added is Google Cloud Storage. So I'm going to show you how to set up some Google Cloud Storage in the demo in a second. There are 5 different variations of Google's cloud storage, which all have different price points and different functionalities. They're all supported. And the third item on this slide is that Wasabi Hot Cloud Storage is now supported directly rather than just being supported as a generic S3 protocol supporting cloud service. So that means that you can now add Wasabi Hot Cloud Storage directly within P5. The other slide I have here is talking about the configuration of cloud storage into volumes, which I'll come back to in a sec actually. So let me just drop back to my P5 installation here. And if we go to Cloud Services, under New Service, this is where we will add the storage, cloud storage from one of the vendors that you see listed here. So for example, under Amazon Glacier, we now have the storage class Deep Archive, which is the one that I just mentioned. And under Google Cloud Storage, we have the ability to authenticate against a Google account and then access some cloud storage within that account. So I'm just going to show you how to set that up. Here is the web interface for the Google Cloud Platform. And under Storage here, I have the storage browser, and I've got a bucket called David Fox, which I've already created. So this is an empty bucket. So if I want to start writing some archive or backup data into here, I can do that by using the cloud connector here. First of all, I have to sign into my Google account. So this requires some redirection to Google. So you'll see this window is owned by Google, and I'm actually already signed into my Google account here. So by clicking, Google will ask me if I'm going to trust Archiware P5 to manage data in the Google Cloud Storage, which I know it's a trustworthy piece of software, so I'm going to allow that. And then I will drop back to an Archiware window where I will agree. And now Archiware has the required security tokens to access that cloud storage. So all that remains for me to do is put in a couple of credentials that the cloud UI gives me, and my bucket name, which is my name. And then we have various different storage classes, which you'll be able to read about on Google's website, and the associated per gigabyte month pricing for each of those, and the costs of recovering data and so on. And I can also choose how many parallel upload streams to that cloud bucket that I want to permit. And depending on your WAN, wide area network connection, you might get higher upload speeds by providing more parallel uploads. So I'll apply this, and then the test connection button will actually make sure that we can create a file inside that bucket, and I'm good to go with my Google Cloud Storage. So if I go back to here, I'll be able to see my Google Cloud Storage configured and ready to go. So the part about version 6 that the slide that I was about to show you is talking about, if I just put this back up before I show you a demo of it, is that the window that allows you to configure cloud storage has been simplified such that there's basically just one piece of information, or rather two pieces of information that it requires from you before it can start setting up cloud-based volumes for you to back up and archive to. And those are that you need to know which cloud service you want to use, e.g. the Google Cloud service that we just configured, where you want your local storage directory to be, and whether or not you want to keep a local copy of all of the data on disk, or whether you just want to use the disk as a cache for the data to be stored on its way up to the cloud. And what happens is this will create 100 terabytes worth of volumes on that cloud service for you to use, but it will not use 100 terabytes worth of media management licenses, each of which will give you 8 terabytes of storage in version 6 rather than 4 terabytes. So that effectively means if you're upgrading your amount of disk and cloud storage provided by your media management and storage licenses, that's this MMSL acronym here, is doubled from version 5 to version 6. So we create 100 terabytes worth of storage capacity, but we'll only use one storage license until you go past 8 gigabytes worth of storage, and then we'll start using the second. So we provision lots of storage, but you don't need to have the licenses to support that storage straight up. It'll just use one license at a time. I'll just give you a quick run through of what that looks like. So back into our P5 web interface, if I use the Add Cloud Storage button down here at the bottom, you can see that I will first of all want to select my Google Cloud Storage directory, service rather, which takes me to that bucket that we configured a moment ago. Then I need to specify a caching directory. So I could create a new folder called Google Cache on my Linux machine and choose it. So I get the path in here, and then I need to choose whether or not I want to keep a local copy of that data. So I'm going to say I don't. I just want this data to get written into the cloud service. And when I apply that, there will be a job that will run that will create 100 1 terabyte volumes. And if we look at that job running, it'll take a little while because it has lots of volumes to create. So you can see it's up to 14 at the moment. So it will create 100 volumes, each of which can be 1 terabyte in size, but it will not actually create the volumes in the cloud bucket. So we won't see anything being created inside of the cloud bucket yet. But the first time I write data to the first one of those volumes, the volume will be created in the cloud bucket, and we will start to populate the data into the cloud bucket, and we'll start to use the first media management and storage license. So the general idea here is that by asking fewer questions when adding cloud storage, it's much easier for people to get up and running without having too deep an understanding of how this works. You configure your cloud service, whether that's Amazon S3 or Wasabi or whatever, and then we create 100 terabytes worth of capacity, potential capacity, and you can start writing data straight away. You just need to decide whether or not you want to keep the local copy or not. Okay, so this has been much simplified. So let me just move back into here. So that was a quick demo. Let's just talk a little bit about the P5 Desktop LTO Edition. This has been renamed to include LTO in the title because the focus is around the configuration that you can see in the graphic here. So we have a single P5 host, which could be a Synology or a QNAP or a Mac Mini or a Windows or a Linux machine, with some storage attached, which the user wishes to be able to back up and archive. And then we're supporting a single LTO drive with as many LTO tapes as you want to create and write data to. So unlimited capacity, and this comes in at $1,680 US, 1,200 euros, 1,200 pounds in the UK. So this is a really low cost solution for people that want backup and archive to a single LTO drive. This bundle doesn't support any external clients, so you're limited to the local storage or mounted network storage on this one host. And it's also not, you can't add expansion licenses to this. So it's intended to be a fixed license for a small installation, but you can trade it in and get some of the cost that you spent on it back against a larger license. So it's a great entry point, provides a lot of advanced functionality for a single user, single host. You get all the benefits of LTO 8 with 12 terabytes per tape and relatively inexpensive tape cartridges. So we're seeing a lot of interest in this module. It's getting us into lots of organizations where we previously might not have been because we were a higher price, and then people learn and appreciate P5 through that particular bundle. Okay, next up, new platform, Amazon P5 for Amazon Web Services, AMI. What does this mean? It means that if you are a user of Amazon Web Services cloud platform and you want to spin up a machine running P5 in that cloud platform, you can now do that using a pre-built machine image. That's the AMI Amazon machine image that Archiware have provided into this marketplace. where many different vendors are selling and providing their products. Specifically, this is an Ubuntu Linux machine with P5. It comes with enough cloud storage attached to run a cache to push data into Amazon S3, for example. And it's a great way of having P5 running very quickly for testing and training and support cases, as well as deploying it in the cloud for a customer to actually archive and back up their data too. So let's have a look at how this works. Here I'm just illustrating that in the Amazon cloud, that's the big cloud on the left, you can have your P5 host with storage writing to S3 or Glacier storage, all within Amazon's infrastructure, but you can also connect up to a different cloud vendor in the cloud on the right and use a bucket from Backblaze B2, Google, Azure, any one of those other cloud providers that we support. So you're not limited to Amazon's cloud storage by running the Linux machine inside of Amazon. You could have your data going into S3 and then also going to Backblaze, for example. So we have a lot of flexibility in the way that this can fit together. And ultimately, this can be used for backing up or archiving your customer's premises down at the bottom back to the cloud storage. So you can use the cloud instance of P5 as a central repository for backup and archive. So let's have a look at how this works. So I have got a login here to Amazon Web Services, what's called the console, which is where you can deploy your cloud resources. And I already have one running instance of P5 here, but I'm going to create another one. So I'm going to say launch instance. And via the AWS Marketplace, which you see on the left-hand side, if I search for archive, for example, then you'll see that there are lots of different vendors' products, including P5 Archive and Backup, free trial, and bring your own license edition. So you can either use this with a trial license or with a purchase license. So let's select that one. And it tells me that the cost of the software is 0 because you're bringing the license, but the cost of the Elastic Cloud Compute is anything from some fraction of a cent per hour up to larger amounts, depending on the size of the machine, how much memory, how many CPUs, and so on. So the next thing we get to do here is pick the size of the machine we want to run on. So let's stick with something cheap. This has 1 gig of RAM, 1 virtual CPU. So I'm going to launch that and launch again and just acknowledge that I have the necessary key pair to connect to that instance. And then Amazon will run a VM basically with Ubuntu and Archiware's pre-built Ubuntu plus P5 image. And if I view my instances here, you can see the second instance is beginning to start up. And immediately we get a public DNS record here that we can use to connect to it. So this takes about 3 or 4 minutes to start up. So if we go back to the one that I created earlier, and I take the URL here, copy that to the clipboard. That's not the URL, that's just the DNS name for this running instance. And then we open a new tab, and I connect on port 8000 to the login page. You'll see immediately it pops up with the login details. You'll notice here that because this is running publicly, we don't use admin as the password. What we do is we take the default EC2 instance ID as the password. So my username when I first connect will still be admin, but the password I can copy and paste out of this interface here. So the instance ID is this number here, which I can copy to the clipboard, paste in to the bottom and log in. And I took the liberty of adding a license to this P5 installation, which I did there. But other than that, you're now free to start configuring this, to connecting it to some S3 storage, to create an archive plan and so on. And remember that we have the ability to connect to P5 running in office locations via the reverse client connection feature. So this means that you can have a P5 running on a file server on a customer's premises behind a firewall, and that machine will keep itself in touch with the cloud instance all the time, so that when the cloud instance wants to run a backup, it can do that without having to traverse the firewall with any special rules and so on. If I go back to my my list of running instances, the second one, remember, was the one that we just fired up. So just to prove how quickly this actually works, if I go in and put this one into my URL, :8000/login, then that one is also running. And if I grab the instance ID, this one, because we just fired it up completely fresh, it won't yet have a license in there. So that one won't be showing that the license has been installed, but nonetheless it's running and ready to be configured. And of course, given that you have the public DNS of this Linux machine, you can open up port 22 and SSH in and start to do Linuxy things on the command line, adding storage and so on as needed. But most of the configuration can be done in the browser. Anything else you want to add regards to the marketplace stuff, Joseph?
There is also pre-installed FFmpeg and ImageMagick for previews.
Yes, good
so
point. Yeah,
this is everything what is basically installed on normal Linux is also there installed.
Yeah, so just what I might as well do actually is just show you very quickly. I'm going to connect to the first instance via the public DNS, and the username is Ubuntu, and that will get me in to that machine. And then from there, you can see that if I type FFmpeg, for example, you can see that's pre-installed, as is ImageMagick. If I type convert, I'll get the ImageMagick stuff. So, and if I do a PS for NSD, Navi Server Daemon, then I can see that P5 is running from the standard directory. And what we do in terms of file systems is we create a 20 gigabyte file system called P5 data, which is good as a cache for writing into S3 or other cloud buckets. But of course, you can make that any size that you want. We don't make it too big to start with because that's 20 gigs worth of storage that you'll be paying for. So best that the customer decides how large that's going to be. Okay, so we're now on to the future development slide, Joseph. So I'm going to let you talk about this one. Roadmap.
Okay. So with 6.0 is now more or less 6 weeks ready, and we will take now another 3 or 4 months for the next release. So I guess this will be something June, July, August for the next release for 6.1. We will have then native LTFS support. So the story behind this is that we like to store everything in the future as a addressable object, so that it's not only in the cloud we are storing objects. So we like also to have on premise the elements addressable as a single object. This allows us in the future, in the near future, to migrate data between all the different storages what we have. So we are then able to move data between LTFS to a regular tape to a cloud storage, and this is the first release which will support LTFS as a native archiving format. In the history, we support already with 5.6, we have already support for LTFS, but this were more or less only for data distribution, and now we are going the next step to support LTFS for a native archive storage type. So this is for version 6.1. Version 6.2 is...
If I can just interrupt, Joseph, you'll keep the proprietary Archiware tape format as well as LTFS,
sure.
because
we keep, because the regular format, the current format has also advantages, so we keep this. But a lot of people are asking us for a real independent format. So this is not related or it's not bounded direct to Archiware. So if Archiware is not the right decision for this company to go in the future for archiving, then they can take their tapes and move these tapes to another vendor, software vendor, which should support LTFS, and they can redirect from these tapes.
Yeah.
But if the people like to continue with our format in the future, because it has a lot of advantages like cloning and so on, then they can go with our own format. But LTFS is just like an option for new ways, for new options, for new possibilities. So it's not a must, but it's a can.
Great, thank you.
And with 6.2, we have then the first release, which is based on this object-based format. So we can have then data migration, data copying, data moving between these different storage types. This is then based on manually operations. So the user likes to move data from A to B or copy from the A to B. Then these are single tasks which the user has to initiate. But with versions 6.3, we have something like a automatic storage tiering. So you can configure policies, and these policies are moving then data between these different storage types. So an example, you like to have an archive for 6 or 7 weeks or for 8 weeks on a disk volume because you need fast access. And after this 2 months, an example, you like to move this data to tape, and this for another 6 months, then you like to move it on end to Amazon Deep Archive. So these things then are based on policies which you are configuring upfront, and they are running then automatically.
So this is the concept of tiering, where you begin by archiving to something which is maybe fast and quite near line, and then as time passes, you push it further away based on a whole volume's worth of data. So once a volume is 6 months old, then maybe it gets moved into the cloud. Would the unit of data be a volume that you're moving?
But these things are configured based on policies. So you are saying, okay, I like to move this data because the volume is full or filled up, or I like to move this data because the time is over, is now reached to move this data from A to B. So these policies has different ways to configure on time or on volume size or on volume on media type. So you can configure these policies for different purposes.
Okay. Yeah. And one other question from me is, if somebody using release 6.2 in the future, if they archive an LTO tape's worth of data, they'll be able to take that tape and say, I want to copy this data also to the cloud bucket, and then the index will reference the data in 2 different places. So they could then they could relabel the tape, for example, and just have the data in the cloud. Yeah. Okay.
So it's just depending on the index. You can copy the data so often you like, and you only get replicas inside of your index. And if you say, okay, I don't like it any longer on tape, you label the tape, then this reference in the index is gone, but you still have your data on cloud or on whatever.
Okay, so each file is still referenced just once in the index, but can point to various different volumes in different places, and they can come and go. Okay, so I think that's really covering a lot of points that people I know from talking to people at trade shows and customers and so on. They want to have that flexibility to maybe begin to adopt the cloud whilst keeping the LTO tape workflow. And then maybe as stuff gets older, they're happy for that just to be in the cloud, so they don't have to have so many tapes. They can put a foot in the cloud while keeping the other foot in the tape library, kind of thing.
That's the point. A lot of people, especially in Europe, are they are a little afraid about the cloud options because the most providers are coming from the US side, and a lot of things are here in Europe very controlled by government and by law, so they are maybe not allowed to store data on a US company, but maybe they like to try it a little bit with a Europe company, and So they will make their first testimonials with a German company or with a UK company, and they have their first experience with cloud, and later on they say, okay, this is working, and they're doing the next step then. But it's our job to give them the possibility and the option to move this data around without making it too complicated, and that's we're seeing as our task to offer these options there.
Yeah. Great. Okay, so that's the roadmap that we're talking about today. Just as a reminder to anybody that doesn't know, a quick visit to p5.archiware.com, and you can download and grab hold of a demo license to get the software running and have a play with it. That's for downloading on your own host, of course, or you can deploy it in the marketplace. So thanks everybody for joining us for this. We've got a bunch of questions that I see that have been entered into the panel here. So I'm going to read them out, and Josef or I will answer them. There's a few that just say thank you from Starline, so thanks for the thanks. Question from Valentin: is there an LDAP integration? So I think the answer to this is no, because we are doing all of our authentication against the P5 configuration. So that's
we are moving away from controlling us by operating systems. So everything is controlled now by ourselves, and we don't see us as a big system with a lot of user interferences and user integration. So we decide to control this by ourselves. It's not too much things what are required to configure, and that's the reason that we are doing this now by ourselves.
I also happen to know from experience that most P5 customers, they don't have lots of users that are logging in from lots of different accounts. They tend to have like one admin person, maybe a couple of users. So the user setup is normally very trivial and doesn't really warrant all the complexity that goes with integrating with operating systems. Patrick's asking, what is a stub file? I think Patrick asked this whilst we were looking at the stub files. So a stub file, probably you realize this as the presentation went on, Patrick, but it's basically, it's called a stub because it's a small replacement for the original. So my original movie might have been a terabyte in size. The stub file is a few bytes in size. The stub file is just like it's a pointer to the original back in the index. I'm trying to think of a reason why we use the word stub. I'm thinking of like ticket stub or something like that, but I'm not quite sure I understand why.
It's the common description for it.
It's the common word in the archive community for replacing your original file with a small file. So that's all a stub file is. It's nothing complicated. Edward is asking, any plan for interoperability with cloud-based MAMs such as Iconic? So that's Cantimo's product. I'm not sure what the deal is with an integration with Iconic, or whether there's one in the works. I know that we are good friendly partners with Cantimo, but do you know, Josef, if there's an Iconic integration?
This is maybe we are the wrong one to ask for it, because they are integrating with us. We are offering our command line CLI now REST, and the MUM system integrators are integrating us because we are offering the storage solution, and they are offering the software solution. So mostly in 99% of our partnerships, these are integrated by them and not by us. But
so Archiware
like in the past,
support for writing those integrations and encourage as many integrations as the partners want to write, because it's better all round if there's more things working with Archiware. I think that there is maybe one in the works, because there is a portals integration from the same vendor. So next question from Rick: can multiple users see and have access to an archive created by one user from files on a multi-user storage server? Can they access the metadata? I think the answers are yes to all of that. So Archiware P5's web interface is multi-user. So if one user is archiving something, whether they're using a MAM integration, or doing it directly within the browser, or using the P5 companion, or having a hot folder. All of these different ways of archiving puts the archive data into the central index database within P5, and then any user that has the permissions can go browse that index and search and restore. So yes, you can do all of that. Yeah, you can do all of that, or you can lock it down based on group and user privileges to decide that some users can do something and other users can do something different. So yeah, we can encompass what you're asking for there. Anne is asking, where do the proxies and thumbnails get stored? That's a good question. So they get stored within the P5 installation directory. So on a Linux machine, that is usually hanging off of the partition where the operating system is installed. But because those previews, particularly of movies, can get quite large, we would recommend that maybe you link up to some storage which has more capacity for the storage of those proxies and so on. Many real-world installations, that's the way that it's set up. If you're working with an integration partner, and then they would be able to advise you. Otherwise, there are some documents on Archiware's documentation portal that will explain that.
But Dave, the easiest way is to configure an archive plan which is living on a larger disk. So you don't have to link something. It's just you create an archive index, and this archive index is stored on a larger RAID array or whatever. Then it's already solved. So
exactly,
we are storing the thumbnails beside the regular index, and that's it.
Cool. Davil asks, will the server also have the stub files in this version like Companion? Will the server, the index doesn't show you the stub files, Davil. So the stub files just get created on the file system, like here, where the files were archived from. The index will show you the original file. So everything that you archive through the Companion app goes into the index, and you can browse that in the index just the same as you always would have been able to. You don't see the stub files in the index, you see the original, in this case JPEG file, because the stub files are only useful for using with the Companion app for restoring directly from what's been left on the file system. So that's the answer.
David, it's also important to mention that if the user don't like to have the stub files, it's not a must. So you can only trigger the archive process from the Companion and use later the regular browser interface for restoring. So if the people have concerns that we are cluttering the entire file system full with this P5 stub files, then the best solution is don't create them. Only use the P5 companion for archiving, and later on, if people like to restore something, do it by browser.
Sure, good point. So the options are don't delete the files, delete the files, and optionally delete the folders, or delete the files and create the stub files. So you've got those three different ways to handle that.
4 different ways.
4 different ways even. Yeah, delete files or delete files and folders. Anne asked a second question. I think I just managed to click on delete. So Anne, if you're still listening and I've not answered all the questions that you typed in, type it in again and I'll find it at the bottom of this list. Mr. Matt X from Vancouver asks, can you specify multiple archive plans in the Companion app? I.e., can you select the archive plan you want to use with the material to be archived? Can you select the archive plan? So the answer is no, insofar as I haven't finished reading the question, but in the configuration currently, you're allowed to specify a single archive plan, and you don't get to pick from one or more at the point that you're actually doing the archiving. I think that's what Matt's asking. What were you going to say?
But it's just an option, if there is a need for it to specify more archive plans, then it's just a matter of doing it. If Matt shows this as a potential good feature, then we will do this. It's not a big deal.
Okay.
But currently we see it more than the regular P5 archive app, which did more or less the same on this side. They had also only one archive plan, and the most people are working with just one archive plan. So we did one archive plan, but sure, we can do more if there is a need. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
I think that answers your question then, Matt. Rick, will you be recording the video? Will you record any of your great video? Thank you. Great video tutorials about the new archiving features. Yes, I will be doing lots of new videos. It's just a matter of time, but I have a lot of time these days, so so expect lots of videos. Jeff, hi Jeff. When adding to cloud, does the cloud storage keep the original file name in the cloud bucket or generate some type of ID? Right, so this is talking about a different kind of archiving to the cloud, where instead of making volumes in the cloud that behave like tapes, that are big storage containers for your data, that you are archiving in what we call the object format, where one archive MPEG-4 file results in one MPEG-4 file sitting in a cloud bucket. Joseph, you're probably best placed to say a bit more about this, because we were talking about this today.
Currently we choose, in the past for 2 years where we add this feature, we choose maybe not the right option. So we decide to let the bucket or the cloud provider choose the name for the object which we are storing, and this is currently the ID. But we will change this in the future. So with the next version, we will have the option to take over the original file name to the cloud bucket. And we are able then to control this, because we will run for each archive process, we will pack this in a folder with own prefix. So we are then safe if customer are archiving one folder with the same path multiple times, also from different servers, that they will not overwrite or create version on different bucket systems. So this will then be possible, because this prefix will separate each archive job for the next archive job which is running. So then we are safe, and we do not have a version or override problem. But currently, yes, we create it based on ideas, and this ID makes it safe that any archive job is not generating copies there.
Yep, I think that's pretty clear. Okay, question from Matt. He's asking if there's any plans to integrate a Let's Encrypt into the EC2 deployed Archiware marketplace instance, so that we immediately get a useful HTTPS connection. I'm just thinking that would require that we know the DNS name that the customer wants to use, because the SSL certificate is hooked up to the domain name that you're going to use to get to the service. But I'm looking at getting a script together to work with Let's Encrypt and Archiware. So watch this space, watch newsletters and stuff on the website, Matt, for more information about that. And then he also asks, does this mean that HTTPS traffic on a reverse client connection is not encrypted? Archiware has its own encryption settings when adding clients. So we don't use HTTPS between the server and the client, but we do encrypt the data, as we've always done with version 5 and backwards. Yeah. So you're still able to do that. The HTTPS is really just required for web browser, web admin access, and for API calls. I think I'm right in saying, Joseph.
Yeah.
Okay, Deval asks, if a client has a NAS, as of now, then in future they want to add cloud and migrate all data, even the archived, to the NAS. How can they do this? I think that was covered by you talking about 6.2, Joseph, where they can migrate existing volumes of data to the cloud. Yeah, so they could take volumes that are stored locally on the NAS disk array and migrate those to an S3 bucket. Yeah. So that's coming, Deval, in a future version. Joseph and David, thank you, says Pino. Well, thanks for being here, Pino. I have an 11 a.m. meeting, so he's got a dash. The thing's going to get recorded. This is all being recorded, I hope. and we'll edit that and make a video, put it on Vimeo, send you a link, so you'll all be able to see what you missed. Well, I guess if you've already gone, you wouldn't have heard me say that though. Matt, if a tape is relabeled in a storage tiering setup, will the system check first to make sure that all the files present on the tape will be replicated to the cloud if they haven't been already? Are there protections in place to ensure against unintentional data loss? While I was reading that, I wasn't paying enough attention to be able to answer it, Joseph. Were you listening attentively?
Yeah, this is still not implemented. So we are talking about future music. And
okay.
Thank you for the point here that we will take. We will surely take care about before we are deleting something that the rule based for migrating is fulfilled. So otherwise, we are not migrating.
No, well, that would be something else with a different name.
Yeah.
Shrikarishna, I hope I didn't mangle your name. If we change cloud service provider, how do we get migrated? How we get migrated data on that cloud? I mean, how to move data? Well, that's basically the data migration feature that is coming that will allow you to pick up 10 volumes from S3 and move them.
But you're not entirely right, David. Currently, we have already data migration. So if he was already running in the past P5 archiving on some cloud provider, he can migrate to a new one currently already based on the volume format, on the proprietary volume format which we have. So there is already a migration tool there.
Yes.
You opened it. Okay.
Just opened it up. Yeah. So you can right click on a volume in the volume list and say migrate and choose a new pool. And providing various things are correct, we will migrate the data from source to destination, and that already works between tape and disk, does it, Joseph?
Yeah, but it's not very flexible because you can only entirely migrate a volume to a new volume. So if you're people are asking for migrate only just data which they are selecting in the index, and this allows you only, what means only, but currently you can migrate data from one volume to another volume, but you cannot select data inside of the index to move data from one tape to another cloud, an example, which you're selecting in the index. Currently, you can do this only by volume.
Okay. Yep.
Okay.
Another question from Rick. Sorry, go on.
But this will come with version 6.2, sorry.
6.2.
Yeah.
So stick around.
So then you can go inside of the index and say, okay, I like to move this single folder from one storage type to another storage type.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Quite a lot of questions here, so thanks everybody for sticking around. Rick needs to jump off to another meeting, but he'll pick up on the recording. So good, enjoy the recording, Rick. Thanks for the webinar, says Timo. He describes it as professional. I like Timo. But he is going to have to go. Okay, there's lots of people that are just saying thank you. I'm just scanning down. Yeah, Rick says that stub is an old coding term. If you delete a stub file, how do you get it back? Is what Patrick would like to know. Well, of course, if you delete the stub file, Patrick, you can always go into the index and find under the location that you were in the file system, you will find the archive files. You'll be able to see and restore from there. I think the stub file is just being created at the point that it's being archived. So I don't think, you might be about to tell me that I'm wrong, Joseph, but I don't think you can go back and say recreate the stub files.
We could do this if people are asking for it, that they like to recreate the stub files. This is not a big deal.
Okay, but so we just need you, Patrick. You just need to find some colleagues that need the same thing, and ask Joseph, and he'll do it. Sean, is version 6 stable enough to upgrade to from 5.6? Joseph, what would you say?
I would say it's depending on the requirements and on the setup which they have, you know.
Yeah.
I would, you know, if this is really an important question for the customer or for the end user or for the reseller, I would ask this question in the support channel, because then they can talk, they chat around, Sven or Andre can ask, what kind of environment you are running, is this complicated or not? 6.01 is very stable, but I cannot guarantee for any circumstances that you will not run in any problems. The good thing is that you always be backwards compatible. So if you're running in some seldom circumstance problem, then you can downgrade again and can run 5.6. But an example, if you have 6.0 installed on one server and 20 clients, then it's a big deal to go back. So it's not an easy recommendation. If this is an important question, I would write a support ticket and ask our support guys.
Yeah, be more specific about which parts of the product you're using, and you'll get honest feedback about anything that you should be looking out for.
You get detailed information if we would recommend it or not.
Yeah, but we have customers in the UK at least who are running 6.01 without any problems, including ourselves.
We have a few hundred installations without any problems.
Yeah.
But we have also a few installations with problems. But there is no stupid rule to say, okay, please update or update not.
Yeah. Justin, I hope that your audio came back, because you say that you lost it. I haven't heard that from anybody else, so I think maybe the internet on the south coast isn't maybe so good. For everyone, the Archiware channel in MacAdmin Slack is a good place to exchange. This is from Patrick. Yeah, Patrick is a regular poster. I recently joined this. So in Slack, get onto MacAdmin Slack, just Google that. There's an Archiware channel. If you're familiar with Slack, there's discussions. Myself and Patrick and other Archiware people are in there responding, and Matt X, and there's a community going on in there. So join the community, say hi in Slack. Ken says, thanks for the presentation. You're welcome, Ken. Been using Archiware for 15 years and it's been rock solid. Thank you, Ken. I'm just thinking maybe I'm brave reading these out live, but that's what I'm doing. Our company got hit with ransomware 4 years ago that wiped out 80% of the files on the server. Thanks to Archiware being one of the 3 layers of protection, I was able to restore 15 terabytes of files back to the server without losing any files. The company was only down for 1 day. Archiware really came to the rescue. Keep up the good work. Thanks, Ken. Glad that we could be there for you. Patrick asking about stub files that we've already answered. I think I've got repeats here. Anne's stub file question got answered. Martin says thanks. Mark says, can you specify the archive plan by name rather than ID in the companion app? Next version. Drop down menu, so you can see all the archive plans by name. When will 6.02 be out, asks Patrick. Joseph, what do you want to say to that? Tomorrow?
Pardon?
When will 6.02 be released? Somebody asks Patrick.
Not tomorrow. We have currently not big issues open, so if there are showstoppers, then we will release it very fast. But currently we are stable, so we cannot expect 6.02 in the next few weeks. So maybe in a month, I don't know. But currently 6.01
more things to be fixed. You need more to fix to make it worth making another release, which is a good sign. Patrick says, same question as MadX. Let's encrypt cert auto install on Synology? ? I guess. I don't quite know what you're asking there, but Let's Encrypt is something that we'll look at and publish some scripts for. Matt, this feels like a radio phone in now. Matt says, currently tools like the Amazon Web Services Snowball can be used with P5 as an initial seed for cloud-based archive. However, it's not possible to take an existing cloud-based archive and switch over to a Snowball for a time. For instance, bulk archive of a data set that would take an extremely long time to upload and then switch back. So I'm not quite sure what Matt's asking. If he's asking that he wants to seed initially a cloud archive using this Snowball S3 disk that they send you in the mail and you put your data on it and send it back. We currently have we're currently working with the Snowball alongside other products from Backblaze and so on. I don't quite understand the question though regarding switching back to the Snowball. So I'll move on, but make a support ticket, Matt, and or get on the Slack Mac admins, and we'll talk about it there. Dieter says thanks from Switzerland. More thanks from all sorts of people. Justin Moore, he sorted his audio out. We'll all be pleased to hear. Just looking for more questions. Just more thanks, and set up Let's Encrypt. People talking about Let's Encrypt, and then we're at the end of the questions. So it's 24 minutes and 1 hour since we started. I think for me, that was a really good webinar. I enjoyed it. I hope everybody else did too. Did you enjoy it, Joseph? Would you like to do another one next week?
It's a good question. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, at least I enjoy the time. You know, it's a very good investment.
Yeah, so it is a really good investment. We had lots of people attending. Yeah. So without keeping any more of your time, I'm going to wrap this up within 90 minutes. There'll be a video coming to you via an email. You know where to find us. So thanks for attending. Hopefully I didn't
Thanks, David.
Anything. Thanks, Joseph. Thanks to both of us. Thanks.
Yeah, you did a good job, David.
Good. I think I'm going to get a job on a radio station. Okay. Goodbye, everybody.
Yeah, you could.
Sorry, we haven't got any music to play you, but Joseph's quite good singer. So, Joseph, you can sing us out. Bye, everybody.
Bye, David. Thank you. Bye.
Cheers.
Bye, guys.